All right, so last time we finished up talking about early adulthood, and today we're transitioning to middle adulthood. So this would be from ages about 40 to 65 or so. And as usual, we're going to start by talking about physical and cognitive developments, and then next time we'll talk about social and emotional. You grab this little door. So we'll first start by talking about some of the physical changes that are occurring. For the most part, we're going to see that unfortunately at this age, a lot of things, physical capacity start to decline, and you start to experience more health issues in this time period. Then we'll also talk about some changes in cognition. You may believe that, as you get older, you have lots of declines in your cognitive capacities. I kind of alluded to this, I think, last time, that there is some research that shows that you have declines in cognition, but a lot of those research studies are cross-sectional, and so you have both the effects of aging and also generational differences, which include, education level, things like that. So when you look at longitudinal studies, we actually find that the changes in cognition maybe are not as drastic or as extreme as you might believe them to be. So like I said, middle adulthood, ages 40 to 65 is what we're looking at here. There's a huge amount of variability, and so it's more difficult, I think, during these adult time periods to talk a lot about, general trends in development. But in general, people in this age tend to have narrowing life options. They have settled on a career in most cases. They've probably, gotten married and had kids. And so the number of paths that you can take in your life from this age are more limited. Career paths become more determined as you get settled into a career. It's harder to transition into doing something different if you decide that you maybe don't like the career you are in. There are progressive declines in both physical and cognitive abilities, but there are some sustained performance. We'll take a look at more detail in that, but there are some particularly cognitive aspects that can be sustained, especially with practice. And there are also some compensating gains. So even though you have declines in physical abilities and cognition, a lot of older adults are good at figuring out ways to kind of work around those declines and still continue to have a really happy, fulfilling life. There does start to become a shift in the way that people think about their lifetime. Most of you probably count your years and the number of years since your birth, right? You're maybe 20-something or 18, 19, and that's kind of how you see yourself or view your age. Around this middle adulthood period, people start to shift to thinking more in terms of how many years do I have left rather than how many years have I been here, which for some people can be a daunting perspective to take. For others, it can be maybe kind of exciting and fulfilling. So it really just depends on your own view. There's also a revised physical self-image. So many people maybe start to accept the fact that their health is declining. They may hold stereotypes about aging and believe that they will fulfill those stereotypes. And for that reason, a lot of elderly adults maybe don't take the time and effort to exercise and stay healthy because they kind of start to think, this decline is inevitable, so why even try? Because they have this shifting view of their own self-image. Not everyone takes that view, and people who have a more optimistic outlook tend to have better health outcomes, both physically and cognitively. And again, that's something we'll discuss in more detail. Some of the common physical changes that happen during this period occur in vision and hearing. So one of the most common visual changes that happens is a condition called presbyopia. And this is basically an inability to focus at different distances. And this usually occurs around age 60, so kind of towards the end of this middle adulthood period. Essentially, the way your eye works, there's like a lens behind your pupil. It's this little spherical thing that can stretch and contract, and that helps focus the light so that you can kind of look at things up close, or you can look at things far away and focus your vision. As you get older, that lens becomes stiffened, like a lot of the other parts of your body, and so it's not as flexible. It can't stretch and contract in order to accommodate to those different distances, and so it's really hard to adjust focus. So a lot of elderly people will often have glasses like bifocals in particular that can help them see up close and far away. In addition to that, your pupil shrinks, which makes it harder for your eyes to allow light in, so there's less light getting in. Your lens starts to yellow, so your vision may have a yellow tint to it. There are changes to the vitreous, which is like the liquid in the eye, and there's also changes to the neurons in the eye. This results in particularly poor vision in dim light. It's really hard to see in the dark, and also increased sensitivity to glare. So elderly people may, have a really hard time out in bright conditions. There's also a decline in color discrimination, and the sensitivity of the retina itself decreases. So all those are just resulting in overall poorer vision. In addition to that, the risk of glaucoma increases. Glaucoma is basically where you have increased pressure on the eye, and that can kill some of the cells in the retina, which again can cause difficulties with vision. And so that risk of glaucoma becomes increased as you get older. In addition to changes in vision, it's very common to experience changes in hearing. Be careful with these two terms. There's presbyopia and there's presbycusis. I know those sound very similar. One of them is for vision, one of them is for hearing. So for fill in the blank, make sure that you've got those straight. It might be easiest to remember presbyopia. Just remember the opia is like optics, right? That relates to vision. So if you know presbyopia is the vision one, then you can kind of figure out the presbycusis must be the hearing one. Presbycusis is this decline in hearing. It starts with decreased sensitivity to high frequencies in particular, and then it gradually extends to all frequencies. And again, this is due to kind of the physiology of the way your hearing works. So without going into too much detail, I would say the way that you hear, you have these little hair cells inside your inner ear that essentially vibrate whenever you hear a sound frequency. So whenever the sound wave comes into your ear, it causes those hair cells to move. And the hair cells that detect high frequencies are really thin. So kind of like if you've ever played guitar, like the really thin strings play the higher notes, the thicker strings play the lower notes, kind of similar to that. You have these thin hair cells for high frequencies. Since they're so thin, they break more easily. And so once they break, you can't like replace them. And once they break, you can't detect whatever frequency they're devoted to. And so you lose the sensitivity for high frequencies first because they're weaker, and then you gradually lose the other frequencies as well. It's more frequent if you frequently listen to loud music. So if you have headphones in, or if you go to concerts and you listen to music really loudly, then that damages those hair cells and speeds up this presbycusis. For most people, it occurs between ages 45 and 65. Like I said, it's a gradual thing, so it may start around 45 and accelerate from there. It makes speech more difficult to make out, and so elderly people may have a hard time understanding someone, particularly if they're not speaking loudly or articulating. Men, for whatever reason, show earlier, more rapid decline. That may be because they're often exposed to more loud sounds due to certain occupations and hobbies and things like that. There are hearing aids and other modifications that can help with presbycusis, and it basically helps modify, or you can also modify the environment to make communication more effective. In addition to changes in vision and hearing, you also have changes in the skin. This is probably one that we're all very aware of that happens in aging because it's very visible. You can see it in elderly people. So the skin is basically composed of 3 layers, and as you get older, those 3 layers start to separate. They're not as tightly connected. In addition to that, you have loss of elasticity. Your skin becomes stiffer. You have decrease in the fat in the skin, and all of that results in wrinkly, loose, dry skin, basically. You start to develop wrinkles on the forehead starting in your 30s, and then crow's feet, which form kind of around the eyes, in your 40s. You also have sagging in the face, arms, and legs. Again, that's due mostly to the sort of separation of the skin as well as the decrease in fat under the skin. You also have age spots start to develop after age 50. Those are basically just concentrations of pigment under the skin that kind of build up and then lead to these age spots. The skin becomes thinner, and so that makes the blood vessels more visible. This is faster with sun exposure, and it's also faster for women, partially because women have thinner skin to start. They just don't have quite as thick skin as men do. And also estrogen plays a role in kind of increasing the speed of the changes in the skin.